So today we will begin from here. As I had told you earlier in the last class, and we had discussed this, that Mary Wollstonecraft was in fact refuting the viewpoints that were laid down by Rousseau, and she was uh, referring to Rousseau's description of man in a state of nature as solitary, and she was, of course, not in agreement with Rousseau. So let us read from here. Rousseau exerts himself to prove that all was right originally, a crowd of authors that all is right, all is now right, and I that all will be right. So Rousseau, as a writer, he had laid down in his books that everything was going on in the right way when man was there in this state of nature. And there have been different authors, a number of authors. They have said that everything is now right, and Mary Wollstonecraft herself says that all will be right in the future. Now, this particular phrase, all will be right, actually, it is, you know, or what is now is right. This particular phrase was taken, or it is a kind of a reference to Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope, as you know, one of the most important poets of the 17th century, and 17th and 18th century rather. And here, Pope immortalized the sense of Augustan optimism to which Wollstonecraft refers in these lines. And in his An Essay on Man, so this is an important poem by Pope, An Essay on Man, which was published through 1732 to 34 in Book 1, lines 293 to 294. Pope says, and I'm quoting from this poem, quote, and spite of right, and spite of right, yes, and spite of pride in adding reason's spite, one truth is clear, whatever is right, unquote. So the quotation is, I'll just reread it, quote, and uh, spite of pride in adding reason's spite, one truth is clear, whatever is right, unquote. So in spite of pride and reason being not able to make the right decision, there is one truth that comes out, and that is whatever is happening, that is right. So here, Mary Wollstonecraft refers to this. But true to his first position, next to a state of nature, Rousseau celebrates barbarism, and apostrophizing the shade of Fabricius, he forgets that in conquering the world, the Romans never dreamed of establishing their own liberty on a firm basis or of extending the reign of virtue. So here, uh, Mary Wollstonecraft refers to how Rousseau celebrated barbarism, and he had addressed, apostrophized meaning addressed, the shade meaning the spirit of Fabricius. Now, this Fabricius was the Roman general, and his full name was Fabricius Gaius Lascinus. So he was a Roman general, and uh, he was renowned for his integrity, and he was commissioned to arrange for the ransom of prisoners after the defeat of the Roman army by Pyrrhus. So this is the reference to this Roman general Fabricius. Uh, Here, Mary Wollstonecraft is saying that the Romans, when they were conquering different countries, they did not think, even for once, of establishing their own liberty on a firm basis or of extending the reign of virtue. So they did not practice what they had preached, this liberty or virtue. Eager to support his system, he stigmatizes as vicious every effort of genius. So here, Mary Wollstonecraft is criticizing Rousseau. He says that uh, Rousseau is eager to support his system, and he thus stigmatizes as vicious, as evil, all efforts of genius. So, as we can see here, Rousseau is being criticized quite heavily here by Mary Wollstonecraft. And uttering the apotheosis of savage virtues, he exalts those to demigods who were scarcely human, the brutal Spartans, who, in defiance of justice and gratitude, sacrificed in cold blood the slaves who had shown themselves heroes to rescue their oppressors. And again, Mary Wollstonecraft refers to the Spartans. As you know, that in ancient Greece, the it was divided into several city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Thebes, and there were other city-states. And among all these city-states, Sparta was the most powerful because there the rulers, they had a rule that every uh, male child had to grow up uh, by kind of enlisting and getting the training for joining the army. So they had to do this. It was their rule from their boyhood days. And so here, as we see here, that uh, Mary Wollstonecraft is talking about how Rousseau was in fact sort of eulogizing, or he was praising uh, the savage virtues. Apotheosis means kind of a uh, most the highest point, and the Spartans, they were actually described as demigods, but Mary Wollstonecraft says that they were scarcely human and they were brutal. So, actually, in his book, Discourse on the Moral Effects of the Arts and Sciences, which was published in the year 1750, Rousseau praises Sparta for its simple, virtuous, and heroic ideals. So, this praise, you know, actually irritates, or this Mary Wollstonecraft cannot support. So she is saying here that actually Sparta, they were uh, they were so brutal and barbaric that they killed the slaves who had uh, fought for them, and they had uh, helped them in sort of you know against the fights with other city states. So they did not show any kind of gratitude, or they did not uh, try to abide by rules of justice. So this appeared to be a savage act on the part of the Spartans, but they were praised by Rousseau, which Mary Wollstonecraft is not prepared to accept. And you will find she criticizes Rousseau on other, uh, points also. Disgusted with artificial manners and virtues, the citizen of Geneva, instead of properly sifting the subject, threw away the wit with the chef, without waiting to inquire whether the evils which his ardent soul turned from indignantly were the consequence of civilization or the vestiges of barbarism. So here again, Mary Wollstonecraft is saying that Rousseau was, or he became disgusted with certain artificial manners and virtues. The citizen of Geneva, it refers to Rousseau. And Rousseau was in fact born in the Republic of Geneva in 1712. And he was the son of a watchmaker. And he articulated egalitarian ideals, though for men only, not for women. And during those times, such ideals were quite revolutionary. And Rousseau died in 1778. So here, the citizen of Geneva, of course, refers to Rousseau. Instead of properly sifting the subject, meaning instead of properly looking into the subject, analyzing, threw away the wheat with the chaff, means he could not distinguish between the important and the unimportant, without waiting to inquire whether the evils which his ardent soul turned from indignantly were the consequence of civilization or the vestiges of barbarism. So he was, in fact, moving away from artificial manners and virtues, and he was very much indignant at certain evil practices which he found to be unacceptable. But he did not try to analyze whether those were the results of civilization or the vestiges, that is, the remnants of barbarism. He saw vice tramping on virtue and the semblance of goodness taking place of the reality. So Rousseau saw that it was vice that was triumphing over virtue, and there was a kind of a semblance, meaning a kind of a, you can say, appearance of goodness taking place of the reality. So it was not real goodness, but only an appearance. He saw talents bent by power to sinister purposes. So talents actually, the good qualities, those were corrupted by sinister powers, evil to sinister purposes, and never thought of tracing the gigantic mischief up to arbitrary power. So he did not ever think of tracing the mischief that was brewing. and that was due to the arbitrary power that was given, up to the hereditary distinctions that clash with the mental superiority that naturally raises a man above his fellows, or he was not uh, up to kind of interested in looking into the distinctions, the hereditary distinctions, and that makes a person mentally superior and helps to raise him above his fellow beings. So he did not take account of this. He did not perceive that regal power in a few generations introduces idiotism into the noble stem and holds out baits to render thousands idle and vicious. So, as the argument goes here, Mary Wollstonecraft is criticizing Rousseau, as you can see here. He did not perceive that regal power, royal power, if it continues for a few generations, it would introduce a kind of idiotism, foolishness into the nobility, and it would hold out baits to render thousands idle and vicious, and it would make general public evil-minded and idle fellows. So it would transform them into such people. So Wollstonecraft's indictment or criticism of monarchy and the hereditary principle echoes some writings of Thomas Paine. You must have heard of Thomas Paine, and in his work Common Sense, which was published in 1776, these sentiments were expressed by Thomas Paine. And Mary Wollstonecraft was uh, actually she knew Thomas Paine because she had met him in London when she was writing this work of vindication of the rights of women. So, in fact, she was familiar with his writings, and uh, that is why she's here kind of echoing this idea that had been expressed by Thomas Paine in his book, Common Sense. Now let us move on to the next paragraph as Mary Wollstonecraft continues. Nothing can set the regal character in a more contemptible point of view than the various crimes that have elevated men to the supreme dignity. So, here, as we can see, the regal character, that is the royal character, would become contemptible, would become something that cannot be, somewhat that cannot be admired anymore. If it is prone to commit certain crimes, and doing that, by doing that, it has compromised the virtue of supreme dignity. And what are these? These are vile intrigues, unnatural crimes, and every vice that degrades our nature have been the steps to this distinguished eminence. So the vile intrigues, So all these administrative intrigues, certain unnatural crimes, and all kinds of all kinds of vices that degrade our nature, human nature. And uh, so that would compromise the eminence of such characters. Yet millions of men have supinely allowed the nerveless limbs of the posterity of such rapacious prowlers to rest quietly on their ensanguined thrones. So, Mary Wollstonecraft here says that actually uh, this situation where rulers, they overreach themselves, they do certain things which are not uh, that would not bring good to their subjects, uh, but instead of rising or protesting against these rulers, millions of subjects, their subjects, have supinely allowed the nerveless limbs of the posterity. Supinely meaning they have been lying down and they have allowed such things to happen to them. And these rapacious prowlers, so they are extremely, uh, you know, uh, they are extremely eager to hold power, and they have been allowed to rule, to rest quietly on their ensanguined thrones. So they have been allowed to rule without any kind of protest or rebellion. Now, here there is a short note with this star mark here. Could there be greater insult offered to the rights of man than the beds of justice in France, when an infant was made the organ of the detestable Dubois? And here we see there is this reference to Cardinal Guillaume Dubois, 1656 to 1723, and he was the French cardinal and statesman, and he was also the tutor to the young Duke of Chartres, who was later the regent Duke of Orleans. And this person, Dubois, was considered to be unscrupulous and ambitious, and he was thought to have encouraged his pupil, that is, this young Duke of Chartres, to indulge him to win his favor. So here Mary Wollstonecraft is referring to this young ruler, the Duke, who was under the influence of this unscrupulous person called Dubois. And here is also, therefore, an example of how royalty could corrupt itself. What but a pestilential vapor can hover over society when its chief director is only instructed in the invention of crimes or the stupid routine of childish ceremonies? Will men never be wise? Will they never cease to expect corn from tares and figs from thistles? So Mary Wollstonecraft is asking this question, that pestilential vapors, that is, evil vapors, or a kind of an atmosphere that is injurious for society. And such rulers, chief directors, who are in charge of ruling the states, they are only concerned in the invention of crimes, or they are childish in nature, in arranging ceremonies, ruling in this lavish way, without being concerned with uh, real uh, administration of the state. Therefore, Mary Wollstonecraft is asking this question, that will men never be wise, will they never learn? And this uh, question, will men never be wise, will they never cease to expect corn from tares and figs from thistles? This is a reference to the New Testament book of Matthew, chapter 7, line 16. And the quotation runs like this, quote, "Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles?" Question mark, unquote. So this is a biblical kind of a reference here. So will they not be able to choose the right thing from the wrong? That is what is meant here. It is impossible for any man, when the most favorable circumstances concur, to have sufficient knowledge, strength of mind, to discharge the duties of a king entrusted with uncontrolled power. So here, Merius is saying that no one, even though he is given a kind of favorable circumstance or situation, will be able to acquire that state or level of knowledge, with sufficient knowledge, and of course strength of mind and character, to discharge the duties of a king. And if he is given uncontrolled power, that is, he becomes despotic, all powerful, how then must they be violated when his very elevation is an insuperable bar to the attainment of either wisdom or virtue? Here, then, Mary Wollstonecraft says, this kind of an elevation is going to be an insuperable bar, it is insurmountable, that cannot be put away or surmounted. So the attainment of either wisdom or virtue is virtually impossible. And good governance is violated when all the feelings of a man are stifled by flattery and reflection shut out by pleasure. So flattery and pleasure, these two things would make it impossible for that person to act wisely. Surely it is madness to make the fate of thousands depend on the caprice of a weak fellow creature. whose very station sinks him necessarily below the meanest of his subjects. So it is surely madness if the administrator or the ruler is a kind of a weak, he does not have the capacity to administer in a right way, and such a person would be responsible for the safety of thousands of his subjects. And the caprice, the caprice is uh, it means a kind of a, you know, something that occurs all of a sudden, a thought without any kind of basis or reasoning. And that person, he himself, would be actually in status below the meanest of his subjects. So, how would he govern properly? But one power should not be thrown down to exalt another. For all power inebriates weak man. So, if a weak person is given a lot of power, he is bound to misuse those powers. He would be inebriated, that is, drunk with power. And its abuse proves that the more equality there is established among men, the more virtue and happiness will reign in society. So here, Mary Wollstonecraft says that it is quite certain, it is a proven fact that there has to be more or less a kind of equality among everyone, and then only can virtue and happiness reign in society. So the abuse of these the powers would surely bring about the compromising state of virtue and happiness. But this and any similar maxim deduced from simple reason raises an outcry. Mary Wollstonecraft says that if anyone says this after considering the matter rationally, this would raise an outcry. The church or the state is in danger if faith in the wisdom of antiquity is not implicit. So this outcry will be raised that either the church or the state would be in danger, and faith should be there in the wisdom of antiquity. It should be implicitly kind of implanted in it. And they who, roused by the sight of human calamity, dare to attack human authority are reviled as despisers of God and enemies of man. And another thing that Mary Wollstonecraft points out, that people who are trying to ameliorate or do something good for to human beings who have been affected by some kind of calamity, danger, who are in danger, and they dare to criticize human authority, then they would be severely criticized, reviled as despisers of God and enemies of man. So that is the problem that Mary Wollstonecraft finds here. These are bitter calumnies, yet they reached one of the best of men, whose ashes still preach peace, and whose memory demands a respectful pause when subjects are discussed that lay so near his heart. And this is a reference to Dr. Price. Uh, and Mary Wollstonecraft refers to him, and she says that this was a person who preached peace and whose memory, of course, uh, should be uh, in the hearts of everyone. After attacking the sacred majesty of kings, I shall scarcely excite surprise by adding my firm persuasion that every profession in which great subordination of rank constitutes its power is highly injurious to morality. Here, Mary Wollstonecraft says that I have criticized the sacred majesty of kings, that is, the divine rights of kings. So now, what I am going to do, it would not excite surprise. So she contends that any calling, any kind of job that includes subjection of rank, subordination, is profoundly harmful to ethical quality or morality. It is injurious. And here she is going to give the example of a standing army. A standing army meaning an army that is maintained always by the government or the monarchy, the king, whether there is any war or not. A standing army, for instance, is incompatible with freedom because subordination and rigor are the very sinews of military discipline. So here, Wollstonecraft is talking about this standing army, and the standing armed force fundamentally needs meticulousness, and they have to be kept in line through imperialism, which is incongruent, that is keeping with not in keeping with freedom or liberty. So this is the problem with a standing army. And we see here, and despotism is necessary to give vigor to enterprises that one will directs. And then this despotic rule will become necessary to give inspiration or vigor to certain courses of actions that one would try to accomplish. A spirit inspired by romantic notions of honor, a kind of morality founded on the fashion of the age, can only be felt by a few officers. So the romantic notions of honor that goes around, and some kind of morality that is founded, that is established on the modern fashions. It can be felt by few officers, not by all, whilst the main body must be moved by command, like the waves of the sea. So the vast majority of this army has to be given orders. For the strong wind of authority pushes the crowd of subalterns forward. They scarcely know or care why, with headlong fury. Mary Wollstonecraft is saying that a very strong command, authoritative command is needed to push the crowd of subalterns. Subalterns here meaning the soldiers, common soldiers, uh, who work or who fight under their generals, and they would be prepared at the command of their superior officers to fight, to move on into battle with headlong fury. So that is something that Mary Wollstonecraft makes clear, and that is what she does not approve of. Besides, nothing is so prejudicial to the morals of the inhabitants of country towns as the occasional residence of a set of idle, superficial young men. So these soldiers who constitute the standing army, they are actually called to be idle and superficial young men. And they would not be acting for the benefit of the inhabitants of the country. When they become official or occasional residents, whose only occupation is gallantry and whose polished manners render vice more dangerous by concealing its deformity under gay ornamental drapery. So, superficially, they would appear to be quite dignified and attractive, very gallant in their behavior, chivalrous. They have polished manners, but vice would uh, become more frequent, and vice would become more dangerous, and the deformity, the you know things which cannot be brought forward before others. So we can see here how the standing army is in a way going to become a disadvantage, because it would try to hide its deformity uh, in a kind of a gay ornamental suit, an air of fashion which is but a badge of slavery and proves that the soul has not a strong individual character. awes simple country people into an imitation of the vices. And here we can see that uh, an air of fashion, they would behave like this, but actually it is a badge of slavery because it is a kind of a copying, and proves that the soul has not a strong individual character. So no individual character uh, can be displayed, and the country people, the common people, they would be prompted to imitate these virtues. So here Mary Wollstonecraft is actually, first she criticized Rousseau, then she criticized monarchy, the system of monarchy, and now here she is talking about the disadvantages of keeping a standing army. What would be the disadvantages of such an army? It is always kept. So let us stop here, and I would uh, stop sharing this with you.